Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're listening to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where Linfield's lacklustre month went from bad to worse on Friday night. Cast aside by Coleraine, dumped into third by other results, we reflect on what could be a make or break couple of days for David Healy's side as they aim to keep up their chances of contending for the Gibson Cup this year. Elsewhere, Glentoran score 8 past what is the worst top flight defence in Europe. Ouch. Carrick made their case for one of those coveted European playoff spots, and we talk the latest Irish League ground plans in your weekly edition of Kicking Match. I've got to admit, in the same week where the League of Ireland kicked off what they describe as their summer season, to look around the Irish League and see multiple games almost get called off due to big, muddy, sludgy pitches. It's slightly humorous, isn't it? I know it's not fair to compare, and that ultimately it's all that wear and tear that we've had to deal with, all the wet and the rain and all the rest, but still, hopefully the sun will come, dry them up, and the one thing we could complain about is all the bobbly pitches, and we'll see if all the grass will return to all those very bare looking goal mouths that were across the league, at least in the ones that still have grass. Regardless, there was quite a lot of big games that happened over the weekend, so as usual, probably should get down to it, and my guest to get down to it and chat with me is that fella from that Glentoran podcast, Shout at the Oval. It's great to usher back in. Hello, Matthew Brown.
Hello, Peter. How's it going? Hope you're keeping well.
Doing very, very well. This weekend in particular, I felt had been coming when it comes to the title race. It is absolutely one of those weekends that you can describe as a twist in it. And we've got to go straight to Friday night in our review of the weekend. That was the first domino to fall. Linfield go in to their game with Coleraine off the back of 5 points dropped in 2 weeks. They had let their lead slip, and Larne were back on top. And they had the chance on Friday night to shake that all off, win, go back up to the top of the table, at least for the guts of a day, and they didn't do it. 3-0 to sorry, struggling Coleraine. I mean, there was dejection online, you could see, from the Linfield fans. There is legitimately people saying out there that this is it, the title race is over. Clearly that's not the case with so many games to go, but that is a tough defeat to take, and at a really wrong point in the season for Linfield to take it.
It's a long journey home from Coleraine when you've got beat 3-0 in a title race on a Friday night. Very strange. Didn't see it coming. Obviously, Linfield are on this wee bit of a slog, and no one does crisis like Linfield. I'm sure there's plenty of teams in the league would love a crisis like Linfield, sitting pretty near the top of the table in a title challenge. They're definitely not out of it. Like I said, I didn't see Friday night coming at all. Coleraine obviously got the news of their takeover going through, and people will say that the players were buoyed by that, and they went into the game with their backs up. But I'm not too sure if that would have had a massive impact, to be honest. I think that it was a bad night at the office for Linfield. Really poor defending, some poor goalkeeping, which Coleraine took advantage of. They ran out deserved winners, and David Healy could have no complaints. He was very gracious in his post-match interview, you have to say.
They took their chances, Coleraine. That's one thing about them. You know, they have Jim McGonigal in the side now, and they're twinning him with Matthew Shevlin, who has had a bit of a rough season by his standards. In the key moments, they were there to knock it in for them. Like, Linfield have been trudging along with this team of non-starters having to step up, and in that game they were able to welcome back the likes of Shields and the rest. You know, they had swapped out Fitzpatrick for McKee. There was no Johns in nets. Walsh had jumped in there, and you know, at this stage of the season, every game counts. And the one thing about Larne right now, which seems quite scary if you're a Reds or a Blues fan, is that they just look completely unfazed. And as Linfield were able to parlay all these results from just before Christmas in, it looked as though they were riding their wave, and as soon as they got the full strength, they were just going to go on a really big run, and that just hasn't happened. In fact, pretty much of the past few weeks, they have started to fall away. Maybe the wear and tear of the season is showing itself on that team, but they just weren't able to craft together chances to win that game. I mean, they huffed and they puffed and they tried, and McBrien tried to make things work out wide. And that Coleraine team have not had a great defensive record all season. And it's worrying if you're a Linfield fan thinking that they weren't able to lay really a glove on them at that point. It was a bit of a damp squib of a game, but Coleraine were the winners. And it is such a big night for Coleraine there on Friday, because you're right, the news comes through that the takeover has now been completed. What that means for the next few months, we'll have to see. But it's a great way to put a bow on that by beating Linfield in your home patch.
You have to look at the Linfield bench on Friday night, and I was amazed. I was like, who are they going to bring off the bench? So many young players on that bench to come on, and you're sort of looking for that player who can grab the game by the scruff of the neck. There isn't anyone on there who is a proven match winner for Linfield at this point in time. There's a lot of potential. There was just no one that I could see that was going to come on and win it for them. When they got the second goal under controversial circumstances, I've only seen one angle of the goal, to be honest. So I cannot say for sure whether it was over the line or not. Certainly didn't look at it on TV, but the linesman had a better view than I did. But as soon as Coleraine got that second goal, I think it just looked like Linfield's heads completely dropped, which isn't something you see from a lot of Linfield teams in the past. You would always have backed Linfield to do what Cliftonville are doing now: score late winners, score late equalisers, do what they did against Dungannon that time. But on Friday night, it wasn't happening for them, and everyone just looked so dejected.
David Healy described it as naive, and that is a perfect summary of it. They just didn't seem to be able to attack the game, get their hold on it. And when you look at the past few weeks in the games that they've dropped all these points, it's the Coleraine who are fighting for their top six life after a torrid run. They lose out to Dungannon at home, who again can be up and down, bottom six side. You need to just swipe them away, and then they have that game won at Mourneview Park when you score that late, and they just can't see it out. They let Glenavon come onto them, and they lose 2 more points from a last minute draw, a last minute goal. And these are things that title winning teams don't do. It's just not what Larne do. And if you're going to look back in the season and there isn't a Gibson Cup at Windsor Park, I think they'll look back on this season and think, we let that slip, but we were clearly the team to blame. Like, the amount of goals conceded, it's been a topic that keeps coming up again and again. You compare conceding 3 to a team who are trying to find themselves now in this new era, compared to Larne, who haven't conceded in 2024. That is the difference, isn't it?
Everything with Linfield goes back to the transfer window, whether it's summer or whether it's January. At the end of the day, they lost to a player who is, in my opinion, the best centre half that we've seen in the past decade in the Irish League, in the form of Jimmy Gallagher last summer. Did they really replace him, or they didn't certainly bring in anyone of his experience? And then it gets to January, and they have this opportunity to do what Larne did, or do what Linfield did a couple of years ago, which delivered them the title. They didn't sign household names. They went and signed Ethan Devine and Chris McKee, and the Gibson Cup ended up at Windsor Park again. This January, David Healy didn't seem to get the targets he wanted, and whether that's down to the lack of player availability. I know that they were linked to Benji McGee and the lad from Scotland, and that didn't come off. But Linfield fans are very frustrated. They have all this money in the bank. Everyone can go look at their accounts and see that they are cash rich, but they don't seem to spend it. And then you've got Larne going out and signing marquee players to try and deliver the title, and it's bound to be very, very frustrating for Linfield supporters. And I said to someone on Twitter on Friday night that I think that without David Healy, I think David Healy is the top manager in this league, as he's shown with his medals after medals, and I expected Linfield to fall away when they made that switch to full time, and they didn't. They went and won the league, and then I thought that maybe they would fall away from a title race by not signing the players to replace players who were leaving, but they haven't. They've remained competitive. And I think that's down to the manager. I think he's done a really good job there, and I think that his board have possibly let him down by not backing him financially. But that's from the outside looking in. Maybe there's other reasons at play. That's why they didn't get the players in.
But they've made backings there. Like they've signed Shields, they've extended him, They've extended Mulgrew as well. They did get Fitzpatrick in the summer, and he was one of the most sought after strikers in the league. And they spent money on McGee, a player who, like, I think could easily actually be a future Linfield captain. I just think he has it all and can play in multiple positions. But again, when they're bringing on players, like sometimes squad numbers give it away. Like they're firing on these players within the 50s and 60s. That can work if you're winning week in and week out, but they clearly have weaknesses, and at times it's going forward and having that flair. It is a bit over the top to say that is over, but they've got some big games coming up. The game on Tuesday is massive, and they need to step up, or this is just going to fade away. That's what it feels like. It's not some sort of big impactful wow. I mean, the past few weeks just feels as though they're like withering away, and I wonder if it doesn't go their way, what lessons can they learn? Is it investment? Is it changing up the way the team works? Because as a unit, that's the thing about Linfield, as a unit, that used to be their strength. They were almost better at some of their parts was excellent, but they're even stronger as a unit. And yes, they've been without Fallon for, well, a few seasons really consistently. They've been without Shields for a long time. I think Cooper is probably the big difference between now and at the start of the season, because he really was that difference maker that was unlocking teams that they're just not doing now.
Yeah, and you get, I suppose it's very, very hard to settle in at Linfield too. I seen someone, a blue man the other day, saying that Darren McBride was not Linfield standard, and I thought that was some statement to make for a young player who's only just joined the club and hasn't had that long to settle in. It's hard to really put your finger on it, because you do look at their starting 11 is still up there with the best in the league, and the league title is not over by any stretch of the imagination. Even if they lose on Tuesday night, there's still so many games left to play, and there's that split obviously. And you seen what happened to Cliftonville last year. This time last year, they could have beat Linfield, gone top of the league, and then they went in this big collapse. And that can happen to any team. But my biggest concern, if I was a Linfield supporter, would be not so much what Linfield might or might not do, but it's the fact that Larne are just going and going and going. They're just getting the job done. They're just being so professional about it, and they're not succumbing to any pressure whatsoever.
It's just how efficient they are. Like, they don't concede goals. They don't drop points, or at least they don't lose, because the only time they've lost in 90 minutes has been to a shock lock all game. It's funny, we were talking about last week about comments about Friday nights and full-time teams. Plenty of people were doing victory laps, saying there's the part-time Coleraine getting one over on Linfield. And yes, I know if you actually took the game in as just a one game and say, look, we go down a goal, and then that second goal, was it a goal, was it not, did it cross the line? That kind of does put them behind the 8 ball there. But as we said, there's only 9 games left for them, so they're in the race now, and it's up to them to go on this run, beat the teams around them, and we'll talk about that game with Cliftonville. Just to touch on Coleraine, because they're the team that are ultimate winners. They'll be hopeful now that this takeover that has gone through, all the talk of it changing the club, it looks like that's been walked back ever so slightly. The idea that they're going to go to full time, it looks as though maybe right over the 3/4, the part-time full-time model for them could be in their future. This season is somewhat of a write-off. It's now about, there's a couple of teams in this little area, but it's building momentum, maybe giving it a go for Europe. And I thought, with all this hype over the top 6 coming up, with all these teams battling in for it and Coleraine letting them in, there was this maybe momentum that perhaps Coleraine could miss out on one of those slots altogether. If they keep getting results like this against Linfield and they can build on this, they'll probably keep that top 6, and all that thought that it could be Carrick or Loughgall or Glenavon, well, they'll have to fight for 7th as they usually would.
Yeah, I think a Carrick might pip Coleraine into the 6th, just looking at the fixtures that are remaining and just how tight it is there. On the takeover, there's been a lot of mixed messages this week about the takeover. We had the Coleraine chairman in the paper saying that Coleraine will not be going full time imminently. That just the money isn't there for it. They need to try and sort of get a professional setup behind the scenes. And then you've got the owners coming out and saying that they will be going full time. I was talking to Stephen Crawford on Twitter on Friday night, and he said that he spoke to the owners directly, and they said that they have already got some full time contracts sewn up, and are looking at bringing in full-time staff, I think it was, he says, or sort of changing the scope of the club behind the scenes. So it was also then said that the investment was 1.2 million as opposed to 2 million. But Stephen said on Friday that that was actually the owners told him it was the original 2 million. But then they're in the Sunday Life today, giving an interview saying that they don't think they'll need to go to the 2 million, and if they did, then they would need to look for outside investment. So it's all very mixed messages, and it's all cloak and dagger. No one really knows what's going on with that investment. But at the end of the day, as I said on Twitter on Friday, anyone would take that level of investment, and it doesn't really matter whether at this stage if it's 1.2 million or 2 million, because Coleraine are going to be better off for it, and whether it's some full time, some part time, which by the way, I actually think might work better. Glentoran this season have sort of switched to like a full time model, and I think that we train now during the day, and I don't think there was scope there for part time contracts, but I don't think it really. I think that there's so much talent that can only play part time football that you'd be silly just to discard that and just go full time, I suppose.
It is kind of the awkward feeling out phase that we're still in. We see these clubs go full time, and as fans, we think, well, there's no way back. And you're right, it does suit some people better. And we even saw in the League of Ireland for the likes of Drogheda that they didn't go full time themselves and were able to stay up. So whatever works. The only thing that matters is the team that you fire onto the pitch. And the one thing that Coleraine does have now is that they have the ability to build up momentum for next season, because they'll want to start next season off to a flyer with a settled team. I think with Brown and McGonigal and Scott, like they're already seeding these players in who look like they're going to be key members of this squad moving forward, clearly. So it's all about next year for them. Sticking with this season, they never looked like they were going to drop out. I mean, the muddy pitches on Saturday kind of dominated the discussion for a while as we wondered what games could go ahead, what might not go ahead. They all did go ahead, and you'd think, well, maybe for Larne, going to Ballymena, that was a pitch that didn't suit them earlier on in the season. There was a shock draw there, even more mud, even more of a detachment from that playing surface that is pristine at Inver. Maybe this could see the shock, and this wasn't the case. More goals for Larne, less conceded by them, and they just extend their lead on Linfield on Saturday, and another win for them.
Job done for Larne. They'll take the 1-0 and get out of there. Sticky place to go, as I suppose you would describe it as. Dodgy pitch. They've got the pressure of Linfield dropping points the night before, and they need to go and do something, but pressure is for tires as far as Larne are concerned, because they did a really professional job on Ballymena. There was chances for both sides. Ron Ferguson had to actually make a good save. Larne did miss their fair share of chances too. 19 goals this season for both Bonus and Ryan. That's a phenomenal return. I think they've got a handful of players in there with over 10 each as well. So goals is certainly not a problem for Larne at all. They'll be delighted. They'll take 1-0 from now to the end of the season. I think a couple of years ago, maybe Larne would have tried to play this sort of fancy football and tried to go out and entertain and tried to win by several goals, and it maybe would have been to their detriment. Whereas now I think it's just about getting the job done and getting home with 3 points.
We talked there about the full-time versus part-time differences. I mean, for Larne, professional is the word that you would describe. They just look like that team of players who know exactly what they're doing, how to play. They have a certain amount of confidence, and efficiency is a word that's always used with them. They seem to use that time on the training pitch to its absolute maximum, and I'm surprised to hear those stats, because it's felt as though from the outside that Ryan's had his time away from the team, Bonus has had his time away from the team, and we all know how well they both did last year. Obviously this is the first full season for Ryan, but for them to score as many as they have, with the likes of O'Neill chipping in, Miller chipping in as well, it just shows you the array of talent that they have there. Look, they're going to be judged on games against the top six now rather than the likes of Ballymena near the bottom, but they did what they needed to do. Similarly for Ballymena, they're not expected to get points against Larne, and maybe news about teams in the championship could give them a bit of a breather compared to the stress they probably were feeling over the past few weeks of their position as we look at those two teams locked in. Jumping actually just to the other team near the bottom, Newry were thumped at the Oval there. I mean, it must be strange for you, Matthew, watching your Glens this season where they have so many bright moments and they can be flat track bullies as they were on Saturday, but they aren't able to do it consistently and they're not able to put those good performances down and get the points that they really want to be where they are. Similarly, I've put Crusaders in this area as well. It's kind of just preparing themselves. Well, Glentoran are in the cup, so that's something to look forward to as well. But it's preparing for a potential European playoff. I mean, what do you feel was the real story of Saturday? Was it, or maybe it's both? Was it Newry were poor once again, or Glentoran were excellent?
Yeah, it probably is a bit of both. I mean, it's the thing with Glentoran is it can go one way or the other. We seem to just always concede goals at the minute, and which is frustrating because when you look at the defense on paper, you're like, oh, that's a really good defense, and should work well. There has been terrible injuries as well, I suppose. There's been absolutely no consistency throughout the pitch, and you've got centre backs playing full back, and you've got young Johnny Russell's came in and he's been absolutely fantastic. In terms of the game, 8 goals, first time I've scored 8 goals in a league game since January 2007. I remember us beating Armagh 8-0. Gary Hamilton scored a hat trick that day. It was a bad day at the office for Newry and a good day at the office for Glentoran. You just never know what you're going to get. If Glens had gone in and drawn that game yesterday, you probably wouldn't have been surprised. But they've hammered absolutely every team, and this is the most frustrating thing. If you go back to say must be August or September 2022, so in an 18-month period, which is effectively the same team bar a few players, they've hammered absolutely every team in this division by 3 goals or more. Like every single team, they've beat Larne, they've beat Linfield, they've beat Cliftonville, Coleraine, Newry. Everyone has received the wrath of Glentoran. But on the flip side of that, they've also gone and had a few stinkers. So you can't even say they come around seldom. They come around fairly often. But then they'll just go and draw with a Carrick or throw away a lead against Cliftonville or Coleraine or whatever. It's very frustrating. It is very frustrating, and you can't call it one week to the next.
Warren Feeney seems to be as perplexed as anybody else about why this team can put in so many great performances but just capitulate in other times. Like, there is a part of this is that as much as you did tank Newry, they still also score what seemed just to be the obligatory 2 goals conceded by Glentoran. I think outsiders will look at this side and think of all the talent and particularly all the ones at the back and wonder why those are happening. I guess when you're scoring so many, you're just not putting in as much of a shift or don't have the same concentration with a team that's just going for it, knowing that the game's away. But what can Glentoran learn from this season now? I know Warren Feeney's talked about how it's not really his team. He wants to change it up. Fisher coming to the fours, a bonus for them, but it's a team that has the elements, but also feels like it needs a bit of work as well.
Yeah, there's 15 players out of contract at the end of the season, which is big. I think they've only got 6 or 7 maybe in contract, maybe a few more, maybe more now. The Fishers signed on. There's thing is, you look at the Glentoran team, and there's players that work really well, and that we've sort of stumbled across, I suppose, this midfield that shouldn't work well on paper of Burns, Sule, and Clucas, but it does. It works really well. They dominate everyone that they've played against so far. And then, like for example, last week, we had to move Bobby Burns in the left back, and then the whole thing just fell apart. And and that's just how it goes. Or if they have to step back 5 yards, for example, against Cliftonville, he took off Junior, and they step back. The Glen stepped back 5-10 yards, and then the whole thing fell apart. So that is frustrating. When you look, you've got all these individuals who are playing really well in spells. Darragh O'Connor yesterday scored his first career hat trick. It's 12 goals and 13 assists this season. He's only 3 goals off, or maybe 2 goals off Conor Mack's total for last season, which is just mad to think about because in my head he's been up and down. He's been a bit inconsistent, but then you look at his returns and it looks very good. In terms of what you learned for this season, I think that the Glens need to really get some players tied down on contracts. There's some good players leaving at the end of the season. You look at the starting 11, and you've got the likes of Bobby Burns out of contract again at the end of the season. Luke McCulloch's out of contract at the end of the season. I'm not sure what they'll do with Luke. Like I say, 15 players. So if Warren Finney wants to go and build his own team for next season, then he absolutely can do so. He hasn't really. We don't really have much to go off in terms of saying, oh, what he's done on the transfer market. He hasn't signed an awful lot of players at Glentoran. Obviously, Fisher is one of his that he signed, and Darragh O'Connor's one that he signed. But he hasn't signed an awful lot. But I don't know what they'll learn necessarily going into next season. They certainly need to get the defense right. That is problematic. But again, for all the criticism of Warren Feeney, I do feel sorry for the fact that there's just been so many injuries this season. It's ridiculous. It's really hard to get the same 11 on the pitch. And you're missing top players like Reece Marshall, another player who's got a contract at the end of the season. So if he wants to go build his own team, then he certainly can. What that'll look like, I have absolutely no idea. If you're signing, if the plan is to go and sign all these players from England, it's in my opinion, it won't work because you seen with Fisher, it took Fisher a solid 5 months to settle in. That means your league season's over again by Christmas, and then you're going looking at the next season, and it's a rinse and repeat cycle.
Will there be questions over Feeney going into the summer for Glens fans, or is he going to be given a go, do you think, in their eyes for next year? I guess a cup could add a bit of extra sauce one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be very hard for Warren Feeney to win over Glenmahon at this stage because of the start. The season was over in terms of the league by the end of November after the defeat to Carrick. That was it done really. Um, and like I say, there's just absolutely no consistency. If he had got a bit of momentum going, if we had a held on for Cliftonville and held on against Carrick, then we're on an absolutely super run of results. And I suppose if Warren Feeney was to come out, he could say, look, the only team that Glentoran have lost to, or teams that Glentoran have lost to since that defeat to Carrick is Linfield and Larne. They haven't lost to anybody else other than Linfield and Larne, the top two teams, well, possibly the top two teams in the country. Um, there's lots of talk. There's always rumors at the Oval. The Oval's mad for it. Like there's talk that Feeney might walk away himself at the end of the season. I believe his son George Feeney has signed a deal with Tottenham Hotspur, and there was always this feeling that if George was to get the move, then Feeney would go with him to help him settle in. I don't see him walking away from a job like Glentoran personally. And I don't think that he will be sacked at the end of the season either, to be honest. But I'm just a supporter who's looking from the outside in. That Glenmahon are notoriously very difficult to win over, and I just never see anyone coming back once they lose them. So like I say, maybe an Irish Cup will be different, but then Eddie Patterson won an Irish Cup, so you just never really know at the Oval. To be honest with you, no one is safe.
The Bobby Burns story going into the summer, I think, will be an interesting one because I think externally people look at him as the best player in that team, and he's so dynamic. What comes with that is what you're highlighting there with him being moved to left back. It's a player I know that's where he started his tenure in the league, and then he's been moved around. But he's such a goal scorer, and he's such a influencing presence in the middle. You almost have to play him there. Perhaps he is hamstrung by the fact that he can play in other positions. He's a big name. He's a big talent. Perhaps is he someone that might see his future elsewhere? And if that is the case, there's so many names and bodies in there. Can the Glens perhaps move on with the players they've already got if he was to go? He's a player which also has issues in regards to staying on the pitch consistently. Now, he's had some mega injuries that are, you have to put it down to bad luck, it's fair to say, but could you see that being a parting of the ways as well?
I think if Glentoran were to put a contract in front of Bobby Burns tomorrow, he'd probably sign it. Bobby Burns is an absolutely brilliant player and an even better person. I'm a big fan of his, and I think that he really enjoys it at Glentoran. He's a very conscientious person who really enjoys doing his bits and pieces for the community, and he does a lot of that at the Oval, and he loves that. He also is able to hold down a job at the IFA, which Glentoran allow him to do. Um, but our training schedule, the way that we work, works perfectly for him. I've spoken to Bobby on numerous occasions and know that he had absolutely zero interest of moving on to anywhere in the Irish League last season that would have been considered. He considers anywhere in well, this is what he said. He said that he considered anywhere in the Irish League a sideward step. At the time, he would love to go play abroad. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was to go. I know his brothers played out in America. That could be an option if he chance was to come there. He played in Australia before. That could be a potential option. He said that our player of the year do. He was speaking and he said himself that him and his girlfriend are more than open to sort of emigrating. So I think that he could definitely get a move. I'm not too sure if it will be within the league, but then again, these players have to look after their futures themselves. So if Glentoran aren't forthcoming with a contract, then what can he do? He can't just hang about every year living off 1 year deals, signing them in May. I'm waiting at this stage of his career. He's only 24. He's not a Jamie Mulgrew. He's in the twilight of his career and is sort of waiting to see how his legs are holding up in the end of every season. So I'd be very, very disappointed to lose Bobby. Even more disappointed if he went to an Irish League club, but I wouldn't be surprised if he went elsewhere, maybe to a different country.
I was just about to check and look up, and I think other people listening to this will have exactly the same reaction. I was going to check what his age was, and I did not expect it to be 24. I know he was on the younger end, but he's also been about for a while. That's what happens when you burst onto the scene as a teenager. But 24, didn't expect that, and just shows you there's plenty of road in front of him, and his brother's back. That might be a nice thing for him as well to have in the country. But yeah, there's an absolute valid argument there. They might not be up challenging for the title right now, but a Larne or a Linfield, or even talks of Coleraine, it's definitely not massive differential or step up in either way, and some of those options are definitely not a step up, at least in status right now. So that'll be something we will keep an eye on. With all the talk of the past few weeks of money being released, Casement looks as though it's going to break ground, or there's going to be work done on that this week. With that, Marcin Muller, former politician, posted up a photograph of what the new oval, the much fabled new oval, could look like. I mean, there's been so much talk of redevelopment in East Belfast. It's just felt like the sunsets, sunrises, but maybe with the money coming through, are we any closer to that? And what did you make of the pictures that you saw online?
I know that the Hamilton Architects released pictures in 2021, which resembled what Martin O'Meara released. There was a slight difference. I was comparing the two, and there was a slight difference, very minimal. Like stuff like the roof, or if you look at the sides, there's like an extra gap in the original photo. So there was, and I was sent a document from a 2021 consultation that's just passed me by. I didn't even remember that. It was just so much stuff that goes on. You just can't remember everything. And I looked at that. So it was, yeah, the overall plans have been drawn up for a long time. So it's coming on 3 years. And before that, even there was lots of discussion. Whether it was see it or not is, as I assume, I just don't know. When I look at Ards are redeveloping their stadium or building a new stadium, they don't have a stadium to redevelop. And they're building a new stadium, 2,000 seater, costing £4 million. And I'm like, wow, if it's going to cost 4 million quid to build a stadium from scratch, how much is it going to cost to build a 6,000 seater with two big stands? You have to knock everything down. So that would concern me a bit. I think that, it's going to have to be a lot of money involved. How much can we get from the executive? Obviously, there's the 36 million there. But I would be absolutely astounded if that wasn't trebled, to be honest with you, at least. Especially with the way costs are going and the fact that Casement Park is pressing on ahead. I think that the clubs would have a lot to say about that. So, interesting developments anyway. I know that there is regular meetings between Nifl clubs, politicians, and things to try and keep everyone in the loop and see what way they're going. And I was joking yesterday with a friend, and I said that if Jared Lawler is the man, the deliver of this funding at last, they'll build a statue of him outside every Irish League ground.
Genuinely, if and when this money comes through, it could completely revolutionise the way that the grounds look. I know this money is 10 years in the making, but it really could change every single ground. And there's so much that you look around almost every Irish League ground, bar maybe Windsor, and you go, there could be work done, or there could be improvements, or there is sometimes big white elephants like the old stand at Solitude or the old stand at Portadown, and you think, when is this going to change? When is this going to be altered? So, I mean, a new oval is something that's been talked about for decades, and now, if the money was come through, how much it would be public, it could kind of change. It could give so much options to the area there. Like talk of concerts, I'm sure it would be great. But ultimately, that's a team that has a huge fan base and wants a modern stadium. Everybody talks about how old school all the groundhoppers coming over, how old school the oval is, and that's great and that's cute and that's quaint. But you want this league to move forward with professional stadiums, and I sometimes look at even the smaller grounds across the League of Ireland and go, if only we could have that for our teams, and uh, up-to-date standards of stadia and facilities. I mean, I don't think fans are asking for much.
No, I'm a big advocate of the entire league, getting new stadiums, getting improvements. I think it's really important, and I don't think that any one club should just be. I think that the priority probably is. I think that the priority probably is Glentoran, Cliftonville, and Coleraine. I think are a club who are really up there. They've applied for all sorts of funding. They've got some, and they haven't got others. So I do think that especially Glentoran and Cliftonville probably need it more than most. But there is a lot of clubs in there that need help. And there's so much potential. Like Ballymena Showgrounds has potential to be an absolutely brilliant stadium. The two stands they've got are absolutely fantastic. And there's two big open ends, just they do my head in. And it's the same as the big open end at Solitude too. It does my head in. You go to all the stadiums look half built. It's really, really
Even
frustrating.
if there was the ability, and I know there's regulations and all the rest, just something where even fans could stand there and fill it out in some way, just complete it a bit more, and it would add to the atmosphere, it would add to the whole energy around it. We've seen time and time again, the number one thing that is putting potential new fans off is the quality of the stadiums. That's the number one thing, and they really do need upgraded. I think all the clubs have said this. So multiple politicians have backed that. So now it's about delivery. We could become like the digger league for about 2 years as we see areas being done and changed. The big thing for me is going to be what they're going to do if we see all these changes, or what's going to happen with artificial surfaces, because with the EU's ban on a restriction on rubber crumb infill coming its way, and we have this big deadline of 2031. What are we going to do if we push ahead and stick even more 3G pitches down? What's going to happen if all of a sudden the rubber infill goes away? And how do you alter that, and how do you change that? But I think that's a discussion for another day. Let's stick with this season now, and we'll talk about that team that has that big old stand, Cliftonville. I mean, in the weekend where Linfield lose out away, Cliftonville, could they have doubled up and made this a super weekend for Larne? There was moments that it could have happened, but it's that same old man, Joe Gormley, scoring the goals, getting them out of a difficult spot. 4-2 for them. And depending on what happens on Tuesday night, we could see maybe Cliftonville be the side that is in the driving seat to chase down Larne.
Yeah, by all accounts, it was a really, really good first half performance from Glenavon, and it was pretty much similar to Glentoran at the Oval, Glentoran Cliftonville. Jim Magilton went in at half time and sorted out the Cliftonville defence, made them a bit more well drilled, and they went and got the points. Now Cliftonville are going into that game on Tuesday night, absolutely flying. They just never say die attitude, and as I said earlier, they fell away a bit this time last year, and they just show absolutely no signs of doing that whatsoever this year. Ashford's played as well in way into the team. He's starting to score goals. He's had to bide his time. They're just really well drilled throughout, and they've got so much quality. And you can take a player like Gallagher out of the team, and it doesn't even look like they're missing him whatsoever.
There is a certain element of Creek. If I'm talking about how at Christmas I could see there was something not totally right about that Linfield team, bar just what you see on the team sheet. You've seen in recent times, and that game you saw at the Oval is one of them. They are conceding goals, and it nearly was their downfall here against Glenavon. They can't keep doing that, and as much as they've been tight at the back for a majority of the season, and it was something that I felt as though was going to be an issue for them. Like, look, I know I'm the man that predicted them finishing seventh. Like, in many ways, the way this Coleraine season has been is what I thought it was going to look like for Cliftonville. Exciting going forward, but leaky at the back, and then that just takes everything away that's good about them. For Cliftonville, they are going to try and outscore you, and they have all that talent, and that could be the thing that could literally fire them to the league title. But losing out on Turner going away, I mean, that looks as though it's a bit of a hole, which is providing a bit of a leak for teams to exploit, and we'll see how it goes over the next 9 games. But that's an area of concern for Cliftonville, despite thumping all these goals past all these teams, the real test will come now against Linfield. And looking ahead of the game, we'll do a proper preview in a bit. But I mean, I think Clifton will go into that game as favourites, not just based on the fact that they are the team in form, but I haven't seen Linfield consistently be able to fight back to going behind. And I think the goals are going to be the difference on Tuesday. And if they can take that step, I mean, the confidence is there for Cliftonville. I hear Joel Taggart talking about this was a 2.5 horse title race, and I kind of believe that. We all were going, Cliftonville are in there, good for them, well done them, and we always thought it was going to fall away like it happened last season. That isn't the case. They're here in the dance. They look fit, they look ready, and if they can keep up the consistency and deliver in the big games, then this could be what is going to be a really memorable season for them.
Yeah, Tuesday night's going to be a really fascinating one. There's been so many of these games, it feels like, down the years between Linfield and Cliftonville. Cliftonville have no divine right to be up at the top of the table. It's pretty remarkable. They're just seeming really well coached, and you say you make the joke about you predicting they're going to finish seventh, but that comes from the Cliftonville supporters were very doom and gloom when Jim Magilton was appointed, and they believed that they were going to really struggle. And he at the start of the season under a tremendous amount of pressure, and there was no room for mistakes whatsoever. I listened to Cliftonville supporters, and I was reading one of them sort of commented on the match yesterday, and they said how well Glenavon played, and then they said, but you needed to score another one because we were always going to come back, and that is because that confidence just runs throughout the team and the same throughout the club, same way the negativity earlier in the season perhaps run throughout the club. This positivity, this belief that whether they're 1 goal down or 2 goals down, they're going to come back. They're going to play right to the end, and that could happen on Tuesday. And in my opinion, Linfield just don't have that at the minute. So if Cliftonville go ahead, I think it's probably game done. If Linfield go ahead, they probably need another to stop Cliftonville from getting back in the game.
They're a well-oiled machine, and it's in all of these teams' hands if they're able to win out. But what Cliftonville have been able to do is thump away every other side, bar Linfield and Larne. And that game for Cliftonville and Larne is going to be pivotal for the team from North Belfast, because if they can slay that dragon, then they have the right to potentially swipe that trophy away from them. And I think what Cliftonville have done is that they've signed well. They didn't sign a lot, but they signed very, very well. Ashford's worked out, Ben Wilson's worked out. The Heels have found another level once again for them. So if they can just sit tight and have less days that they've had against Glentoran and even there at Glenavon, and have more of the ones where they're thumping them through and looking tight at the back, big games from the likes of Casey, they are well in this. Elsewhere around the league, I mean, Larne haven't conceded a goal in 2024. Crusaders hadn't won a game until that game on Saturday. I was at that game between them and Loughgall, and it was a big opportunity for Loughgall actually, because if they had the chance to take back sixth again, and with the victory there, they could have looked very, very pretty. That wasn't the case. They were great in the first half, and then the second half they looked a lot more tired. And I mean, Crusaders didn't do a huge amount, and I think the highlights prove that. But they get the goal, they see it out, and Loughgall never looked like they were going to take that lead back from them. That's 4 games in a row for Loughgall without scoring a goal. And I mean, Loughgall's season is not going to be defined on if they get 6th or 7th. I think they've already done well. They'll be frustrated because they've had the opportunity to grab them, absolutely. But Crusaders are exactly like Coleraine, except their place in the top half is assured, I think, or pretty much assured, bar the craziest meltdown of all time. He said, and some team going on a mega run. But I mean, for Crusaders, they're Williamson started the game. I don't know if it's just because Tuffy was like, I'm not playing on that muck field. You know what? Save that to somebody else. Doesn't really matter what the result is here. But they went out. It looks as though Heatley pretty much is confirmed to be retiring at the end of the season. I mean, I looked at him on Saturday and I thought, if someone was to stick a pen and paper in front of me and go, name your all-time Irish League 11, I think he might be one of the first names on it.
Yeah, terrific player, and he never seemed to really fade. I was quite surprised that he was retiring at the end of the season, but then I suppose everyone has a shelf life, and it's probably hurting them a bit to keep playing each week. In terms, I know we've talked a lot about Glentoran in the podcast, but probably because I'm on the podcast. But for the rest of the season, Glentoran and Crusaders matches, you can probably just go, yep, they played and moved on, because all games are just going to be a wee bit of a damn squib. That Crusaders games, much like Glentoran, are simply about getting momentum going into the playoffs. Because if you look historically, the team that goes into the playoffs with momentum wins the playoffs usually. So that's what it's all about. I know that the Glens are a bit different. They have the Irish Cup, but in terms of league, their games are just going to be a wee bit of a non-event, to feel. And I felt maybe a bit like this at Loughgall, although to be fair, they needed to probably get a win on the board, because, as I say, several games without a win is never good, and it's not really the way Stephen Baxter wants to buy out. In terms of Loughgall, they've had a brilliant season. They can be so proud of their season. They should be absolutely delighted. I'm sure that they weren't expecting that at all. I didn't see Loughgall last season, but I remember reading about the likes of Keith Bailey talking about them, and I think he even said on your podcast that they were the best championship team he's ever seen. So I fancied them to come up and make a dent. And they have. They've got the ball and the mallard about them, if you remember when they first came up.
Big time, big time. They're a team that know exactly what they're about, what they can do, and I think they're quite. I knew that word keeps cropping up. They're quite an efficient team. I mean, when you have a player like Benjamin McGee playing the way he is, he is a danger man. But they play with flair, and I mean, they were passing about on that difficult surface. And I mean, if they were able to squeeze a goal, and they had the opportunities there, but bar for Williamson making some big saves, it could have been another one of these shocks. And I guess when you have some of these shocks, it's not really a shock anymore. I think Dean Smith is a very driven manager, and 9 wins this season is brilliant, and I think more will come clearly in the split. And I think just for them, they'll go, this was brilliant, but oh my goodness, if we just really play it up to how their ability and on how well they can play at times, it could have even been better. But with that result, then it opened up for the likes of Carrick Rangers to sneak into 7th. They're able to win on their own surface for once, and they're able to hold off Dungannon, the topsy-turvy Dungannon, really. And you highlighted already, I think the fixtures are great for Carrick. They've just got whatever it is now, 4 games or 5 games. Yeah, 4 games to go now, and I think 7th would be delightful for them. But in turn, I agree. I think they've got their eye on 6th, and as much as they'll go, oh, we don't really want to talk about this. They've got a mini season. It's a round robin of 4. They do it. They're in, and I mean, it would be a great turnaround for a team who's just been consistently inconsistent.
Given their record against Glentoran this season, they'll be absolutely thrilled if they get top 6 and give themselves a really good chance of going far in the playoffs. Yesterday was the 15th goal, or Saturday was the 15th goal for Danny McPherson, as I'm calling him now. Such as his continuous name changes. I'm sure it's an absolute commentator's nightmare. Quite fortuitous for his goal yesterday when Stephen Scott slipped. But they got the job done. Looks like Carrick, bit of a plain sailing for Carrick, but reading the interviews in the papers and reading the match reports, it was not the case at all. It seemed like Dungannon were very, very frustrated to not come away with anything from the game. Bigger Romana getting their goal. He's turned into a bit of a goal scorer for them. I think he scored 1 or something for Glentoran the entire time he was there. And as I already said, I do think that Carrick are gonna, I think they'll pip Coleraine to the 6th spot, just looking at the fixtures that the two teams have got. But it is nice to have that wee sort of battle in the middle and everything. That when you've got like Crusaders, Glentoran, Dam Squibs, I think you're pretty much nailed on that Ballymena are going into a relegation playoff, and Newry are probably going down. Even though there's 5 points there, I just don't see that really turning around. So it's nice having that wee middle table top 6. Will they, won't they battle?
It's funny with Bigorama. I mean, like, it was a great goal on Saturday, but I think with him, like, it was great to be there and to have it. But I think no matter how great a goal he'll score, everyone will go, remember that time he scored that thunderbolt against Wigan? Like, that's the goal for Newcastle that he scored, and he's now thumping them in against Carrick. Look, that's the way the season goes. But I wonder, is there like a picture on his wall going, yeah, that's the one, really, isn't it? But that result's tough for Dungannon because it somewhat knocks them out of the top 6/7th kind of discussion. It's a lot of points to try and claw back.
Yeah, and just on another note, Stuart King sent off. That'll not be the last time he gets sent off. I hear him on the touchline so often. So it wasn't surprising to see him sent off. In terms of Dungannon, massive credit to Rodney McAree for the job he's done there. That'll fly under the radar a bit. They were really in the doldrums last season, and he's really done a great job of turning that around. Such a young team still. They are a match for anybody, and they've got some really great results. And they'll be thrilled with how their season's going, even to have been in that conversation. No, looking at the league table, it might sound a bit daft to say, but they can still finish quite high up the table. Their highest finish in a while. I know this is the same Dungannon that used to finish the top sort of four, got the Irish Cup finals and things, but they can be really pleased at the progress on the pitch there. So just to be shouted to them, because I think that they don't get talked about too much.
Before we get into the previews this week, a little note that seems to have filtered out, and it has significant news for teams at the bottom of the league, with Ballymena and Newry pretty much locked in as our bottom two now. The real battle there was to avoid, and it will be to avoid 12th, as that's automatic relegation, and then 11th would be a playoff. But we look at that championship table and we see it's a 4-horse race, somewhat maybe shortened to maybe a 3-horse race, with the result for Dundela against Institute, but of course plenty more games to play. I think they've got maybe 2 or 3 more games than the likes of the Premiership have, so that they've got plenty of runway there. But Dundela are the story so far this season. They're winning out, big result for them to go all the way to the Brandywell, and some cracking goals there as well from the likes of Hall. But news seems to have filtered out that they will not be playing Premiership football no matter what. That's a bit of a shocker's probably over the top, but I think people would look at Dundela and the little new stand they've got at the other end. I think this is a team going to give it a go for top flight football, but regardless of where they finish, it will not be the case.
Yeah, very disappointing for Dundela. They're obviously an East Belfast club. I would spend a lot of time around there in their social club and things, and would know a lot of people involved at Dundela. Great club, great people. And I would be, I know it's only a short dander, but it'd be a great away day because, like I say, their bar is fantastic. But really disappointing for them that they
Cocktails on tap last time I remember.
yeah, I think you're probably right. But I think that they're sort of this club where they have ambition in that they've done a lot of work to their ground. From what I understand, they've got big plans for this. It used to be the old pro kickboxing gym. They want to knock that down and turn it into some sort of viewing lounge hospitality sort of area. But their pitch is too narrow, and they have, of course, sold off the far end of their ground, the ground that where the terrace would be, where the dugouts are. They've sold that to property developers, so it leaves absolutely no scope to be able to widen their pitch. So this would mean that unless UEFA/FIFA change their regulations, that they can never play Premier League football at that ground, which is just a massive shame. Now obviously there is the opportunity to ground share, and I don't know what the crack is there. Is it a case that the clubs are saying no? Is it a case that they don't really want a ground share because they do make so much of their income through their social club? If you go into that place on a Saturday, it's absolutely buzzing. It's really busy, from the local community, or the Dundela supporters to opposition supporters. So, that would obviously remove a large chunk of that income. Plus, they'd have to pay, of course, to use a different ground. So, hopefully, something can be done. But I just don't see what. And it is a lot of conversation about how they'll never play Premier League football at Wilger Park, which is so disappointing because that could be the destination for the football hipster.
I've always said this: football hipster, potentially Dundela. They've got the bar, and it's in it's an area of Belfast. It's kind of accessible from the south and the east and all the rest. So, yeah, look, teams have to make this decision. I'm not there looking at the money books and all the rest. So I think a lot of people will be disappointed about that, just with the idea that Dundela could be this next story, this next Ballinamallard, this next Lochall kind of thing, even Warren Point jumping up. So we'll see how that rumbles on. The implications then of that is that if they finish first, it means that We will have no promotion relegation playoff for the 11th side. That would drop down to 12th.
Right, well, that's interesting. I wasn't too sure what way it would work, to be honest. I just didn't know if they just worked their way down the league or not. Newry will be absolutely thrilled with that news, as will Ballymena, to be honest with you. Those two clubs will be absolutely delighted. Not that it's a sure thing.
They'll be having double scars. They'll have like a green Dundela scarf every time they go around. They'll be fascinated on that results. Yeah, that's what I'm led to believe, that if, let's say that the scenario is that Dundela finish first, then it would be 12th against the second place side if they've applied for a license. And I am, well, Portadown definitely has, without knowing any information about this. Institute even though they've shot up, I mean, I think they had in previous seasons, Bangors had a ground that's been up Premiership quality before, so why not? You just have to go through the paperwork there. So I think that would then be a straight playoff. If another team, well, based on last season, I think, so let's say one of those teams finish first and Dundela goes second, then that's just the question over, does that then filter down to third or whatever? Do they then do the playoff against Ballymena? I think regardless, they're all pumping up Dundela, a side who have got a big lead at the top there. There's more runway to go for them, but I mean, is it 7 points to have over Portadown? And then it's kind of a similar over Bangor, who have played one game more. I mean, it's theirs to lose, it feels like.
Yeah, it's the championship's almost more exciting than the Premier League, or probably is more exciting than the Premier League this season. It's crazy, crazy league. I think the second tier of most football leagues are, to be honest. But it is tight at the top, and I think that all eyes will be on second place. I think if Dundela, as you say, if Dundela can't go up, and then it sort of makes it a bit irrelevant. Although I suppose then, what happens then if, say, Dundela finish second and Institute win the league? Would it then go as the third place the playoff? Does it then filter down?
Last year, Warrenpoint were second, and then they were gone, and then it went down to Anna. That was in third. So I mean, that was an example of how it went down. I'll have to get the handbook out for all those fans who are of the championship sides. I'm sure probably Ballymena fans have already done that, but yeah, it's I guess it's disappointing. I think just from the way we like to see football, where it's all done on the pitch and it's not. I think we've kind of looked forward to a situation where all those years where Loughgall were winning the league and there was just no chance of them moving up. It would be a shame if we're all looking at two different things. We're looking at a football table and then a whatever it is, an application table as well, which won't be released for a while. So of course that's where we all found out about that Warrenpoint news. It was post-season. We're like, hold on a second, when they publish, that's we don't want to see a title. We don't want to see like a table and then go, well guys, we're just gonna have to sit and wait for the results of the license applications. It's like deadline day or something like that. It's like, oh well. So that's where we are with the championship. We have a big week ahead, the main one being on Tuesday night, which I appreciate a lot of you. It's already in the past, so let's talk a wee bit about this now. Linfield and Cliftonville face off. I mean, if you're a Larne fan, you're hoping for a draw. Yes.
Oh yeah, up the draw for Larne fans, isn't it? They'll be hoping for a bloodbath of a game with loads of suspensions and a solid 0-0, because that's just the best result for them. If you had to pick one though, if you're a Larne fan and you had to pick one to win, do you want Cliftonville to win and continue with this sort of run of never say die momentum, or do you want Linfield to win, given that they've lost a few? It's a hard one, isn't it? Like, I don't know what I'd want.
I think you want Linfield to win there because, I mean, Cliftonville win and they go above Larne.
But then if Linfield win and then they go like a million games unbeaten, that's what they do.
That's it. It is let's go draw, like 100%.
Yeah.
It leaves them both teams with one game more played, where Linfield are 3 points behind and Cliftonville are 2 points behind, and then Larne can go in and win and just expand that. I think a draw actually is a disaster for both sides. Neither of them want to lose, and I do think actually a draw is probably the more likely result, which again would say a lot about both teams. It just depends how it plays out, but I mean, for Cliftonville, if you don't win there, you're going, well, we just don't have that killer edge, and perhaps Linfield are the team that could bounce back more because they've had the better results in the big games of the two, and perhaps they can go and get that Larne monkey off their back now that they were able to do it in the cup. It wasn't over 90 minutes, of course, that result in the League Cup, but yeah, all eyes on that, and I think perhaps a draw. helps and knocks them out, or at least it leaves Larne with so much more wiggle room. I think if I had to put money on it, I'm actually going for a draw, but I do think Cliftonville are the favourites.
I think Cliftonville will win this. I think just with, again, it's that word momentum just behind them. Linfield, looking at their team, they don't have any big game changers coming off the bench. I think that Cliftonville just have so many goals in them, and I just think that it'll be maybe even a 2-0 win the Cliftonville, even though we've got that dodgy defensive record. I think they'll just be so up for it. The absolutely packed house. Tuesday night football under lights. There's, Cliftonville fans can make a bit of noise at Solitude. So I think that they'll win that one.
I think from an external point of view, you want this to be a memorable game, because if it's not, it's been a draw, hasn't it? Because I think if there is a goal scorer that wins it out, there could be a hero here, because it will be such a big shift momentum from points and from just building themselves up. These teams will meet again, and both teams will have to deal with Larne as well down the road, but it just gives them such a bump either way. But they go from that game, and then they look ahead to the weekend's games. It's a busy day if you're sitting on your sofa to watch Irish League football. Larne, Glentoran, Inver Park. Larne's record at Inver Park is crazy. I mean, one of these teams could have a mad week. I mean, if you're listening to this on, I don't know, Sunday morning of the week I released this podcast, and you're just hearing about all this down and out for Linfield, and there's a situation where they've won 2 in a week against Cliftonville, and then later on Saturday against Ballymena, and Larne have lost, you're thinking, what are you talking about? Because we expect Larne to get something from this game against Glentoran, and I don't think Glentoran's record against Larne has been excellent over the past while, but I mean, they've just scored a lot of goals. Larne don't concede many. Is it the immovable force against the unstoppable object, or whatever way that goes?
Well, Glentoran and Larne games have been pretty tight, to be honest with you. Glens don't get results against Larne, but they've been pretty close. Like, Larne haven't really blown Glentoran out of the water, but again, it comes back to this professional performance thing. It's just like they get a goal and then make it very tough for Glentoran, and if Glentoran dare equalise, then they just go get another. So I know that I should always back Glentoran to win these, but I just think it's going to end up 2-1 to Larne, because they all seem to end up 2-1 to Larne.
I weirdly back this to be a draw. I think both teams, we're talking about Cliftonville and Linfield, Larne going draw, draw, draw. Both these teams will probably just not even believe Glentoran could win it, and they'll go draw, draw, draw. So I think this will be a score draw. I think it'll be 1-1, 2-2, and Glentoran will think what could have been, and Larne perhaps show a bit of a chink in the armour and a bit of panic. But again, at Inver Park, it's coming. It's Larne wins on Friday nights in particular. So, I mean, it would be a big test for Larne, and recent form says that they'll come through it with shining colours, but I think maybe Glentoran can give them a go. Elsewhere, I mean, Linfield take on Ballymena at Windsor Park. The record there for Ballymena at Windsor Park is poor, to say the least, and Cliftonville go down to Stangmore Park. I think that's definitely a trickier fixture for Cliftonville. 2 in a week, perhaps could get caught there. I kind of expect Linfield and Cliftonville to win out there despite their results, but again, at this time of the season, tired bodies, tired minds, you just don't know if one of those teams could sneak up, because both of them will want to win, because they've still got something to play for both of them.
Yeah, I think in terms of but touching on both Cliftonville game and the Linfield game, I think that Cliftonville obviously went to Stangmore Park and lost back in November. They definitely have the tougher of the fixtures, in my opinion. I think that that will be a very tight affair, and I think that Cliftonville might just sneak it, maybe 1-0 or 2-1. And in the other game, with Linfield and Ballymena, I think that Linfield just seemed to come away from those games with all 3 points, and I don't see them doing any different. In fact, I don't even think the Ballymena have scored against Linfield in about 3 years, or even more. I actually think that this is going way back to maybe 2021. Yeah, 21. So that's like 3 years. Crazy. It's a crazy stat, but there you go.
Well, I will predict that streak will be broken, and I think Ballymena might score. I can see that being, oh my goodness, Ballymena have just scored at Windsor Park in the first half. This is just getting from bad to worse. But I think it's going to be 2-1 both ways. Tighter for Cliftonville the way things have been going for them, but I think they'll win out, and I think Linfield will win out 2-1 as well. Elsewhere, Carrick go down to Loughgall. I mean, could this be called off? Get your eyes on it, because I mean that pitch was mucky on Saturday, and I'll have a bit of drying out to do. I mean, it was iffy at then. But what we found actually is that Carrick Rangers don't like playing on their bobbly pitch of Taylor's Avenue, and maybe find it a bit more difficult in the muck. But I mean, they have the momentum. Loughgall are struggling to score goals. I actually think this might be 0-0. I know it's draw central for me, but I can maybe see this just both teams struggling.
Earlier on the season, they played an absolute thriller at Lakeview. It was ended up 4-3 to Carrick, and then in the return fixture, it ended up 2 each. So I think there'll be plenty of goals. Carrick will be missing Curtis Forsyth, which is a big loss for them. A couple of their fans said that he's a contender for their Player of the Year, so it is a big loss to them. But I think this will be a draw too. But I'm going to go for another 2 each on that one.
With Stuart King watching on from the Loughgall balcony and the gods shouting at his players, or if he's allowed to pass on notes or whatever. Elsewhere, Crusaders host Glenavon. I think the way Glenavon played against Cliftonville, they could give them a go here. I think this could be actually a 2-0 victory for Glenavon.
Yeah, Glenavon. You look at I think they've only won 1-6, but that probably looks worse than what it actually is, because they've played quite well, and there's the draw against Linfield, and there's the good performance against Cliftonville. So I would not be surprised to see Glenavon come away with something here. They won there about this time last year, maybe early January last year. I remember them winning at Seaview, so I think that maybe do the same again. KG affair close. I'm gonna go for 1-0 Glenavon.
Final game of the weekend. Newry are beating Coleraine, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. That's gonna be a bit of a back down to earth for Coleraine. Barry Gray masterclass. No, I think that Coleraine might go there, and I just don't see Newry ever winning a game. That's just the way it is. No, the way people always talk about record low points and things when teams are going badly, and I just feel like that for Newry at the minute. I think that they're just in such a rut. And I think Jamie McGonagall's just such a talismanic figure for Coleraine. And having Shevlin back, it's huge. So I actually think that Coleraine will go there and win.
I think absolutely Newry are just completely out of steam, but I mean, I genuinely believe it. I think this is 1-0 to Newry. I think after all that and the high that Colerane's on, I think it could give them perhaps a little bit of confidence in them. And I just think Newry have got to fight at home. They've got an awful record at home, and I think despite all those draws that I've been predicting, I genuinely think that Newry could win this. Tight affair, 1-0. It's the shock, and it maybe sticks Newry back in after that awful result, because I mean, if that isn't going to shake you out of your boots, I don't know what. And it's one of those results which should be more winnable of the top 6 sides. So yes, genuinely 1-0 for me. I'm preparing to be laughed at this time next week.
Yeah, well, we'll soon see, but that's what it's all about. It's about making predictions, put your neck in the line. You can't just go draws for everything.
Mr. Brown, I know regular listeners to this podcast know that you are, of course, Mr. Shout at the Oval, a very popular podcast at reviewing ex-Glentoran players, but the plugs will be there for you and your account online. But regular listeners will know my question that I'm asking guests between now and the end of the season, because you've all plugged your socials multiple times now. Who is your player of the season, do you think, and why across the league?
At the start of the season, I went for Andrew Ryan as being Player of the Year, and he's definitely put his thrown his hat back into the ring again. I think he could have a massive part to play between now and the end of the season. Seeing that he has 19 goals this season, as you said, it shouldn't be that many because he's been out injured so much. I'm gonna stick with him. I'm gonna nail my colours to that mast and say that I think Andrew Ryan is gonna have a massive part to play between now and the end of the season for where the title goes, and I think he will be the Player of the Year.
Right now, with games we played, who do you think are the 3 contenders for it? You know, we have that at the end of the season. Like, we've got the 3 nominees, and then we have the winner. I think right now it's Ives, Ronan Hale, maybe plus one other.
I would say Ronan Hale, Ben Wilson has to be up there, I'd probably say. And yeah, tough one for the third one. As it stands, ironically, I don't think Andrew Ryan would be in the conversation for the top 3, but I think he's going to have a massive part to play between now and the end of the season. But certainly those 2, and then there's always just a wee third one thrown in there.
And finally, who's going to win the title?
Larne. I think Larne will win it.
That's what everyone seems to think and see. Amazing double for them if they can do it. Matthew, been a pleasure. Great to have you back on the podcast. You never know, if it all goes well in the Cups, I could have you back on for the end of the season. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers, Peter.
I'm going to let you into a little bit of inside baseball, a bit of internal logistics to this podcast, because I think you're listening to the end. You're pretty dedicated. So pretty much last week, you were all way too busy on Valentine's night. I know you were. I could see the stats. Yes, somebody's listened to the podcast maybe during the day or something like that, but not as many as you used to. And then on Thursday and Friday, a lot of you caught up. I can see that information. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed your time reheating fish fingers or going out and doing something nice with your beloved, or at least trying to maybe get a beloved. Whatever it is, I was here waiting for you. But you know what? If you did miss out on the podcast last week, I said podcast because there was two, you can go back and listen to them now. I had one that was talking about the League of Ireland, a bit of a preview, you want to have a bit of information about that league that kicked off, or you just want to hear about all the big games that happened last week. And you know, I'm going to say this, if you don't want to miss them again, good way to do that, because it's free. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can go and click a little button on like the home page of this podcast, and you can subscribe. You can follow, and it means you should get little notifications to let you know when the latest Kicking Match episode has come your way. I'll be here waiting no matter what goes down. Anyway, a good way to also follow up, it's on social media. We are Kicking Match on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. If you had a nice meal, I don't know, send me a pic and I can retweet it, and so I can understand that you had a nice food instead of listening to this Irish League chat. I'll be back next week. I always will be. Until then, tally-ho.